Talk about it is Ruthie Blum. She is a former advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and co-host of the Israel Undiplomatic podcast, and JNS TV. And Colonel John Mills is retired from the U.S. Army, a former director of cybersecurity policy at the Department of Defense. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Good morning, Deneen and John.
Yes, good morning. So Carolyn Glick, the international advisor to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, speaking with Sunday Report yesterday about the partnership between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Well, I think that what President Trump said yesterday was very important. He said that this is a partnership that perhaps has no precedent in history, the partnership between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. And I think that the implications of their cooperation, of Israel's cooperation with the United States, are nothing less than historic. And what we're seeing now is that the history of our world, and particularly of the Middle East, is being written right before our eyes in a way that's going to make our children and our grandchildren much safer thanks to these two men. You know, Prime Minister Netanyahu has been leading the campaign globally against Iran's nuclear program for over 40 years. Since really the beginning of the Islamic regime, he saw the threat and he was warning about it. And as prime minister, he has been acting to delay it, to postpone it, until we finally got to the moment where we had to actually act and destroy it.
You know, Ruthie, the thing is that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu actually engaged in preemptive strikes. Why? Because there were reports that Iran is anywhere from between 2 days, possibly a week, no more than a month away from a nuclear warhead, and that would have spelled disaster. So he exemplified leadership, but President Trump came in. Why? Because Fordo, which I believe was 300 feet underground in terms of Iran's uranium enrichment facilities, and there were two other sites that needed to be demolished, and that's when you combine those two efforts, I think that was mission accomplished. Why? Because it's in the U.S. national security interest as well as other states in the region as well as the world. What say you?
Oh, absolutely. And there's no question that Arab states are they're watching closely, especially the Abraham Accords countries, the Gulf states, and even Saudi Arabia. But, you know, if you step back, Carolyn Glick was talking about the 40 years during which time Netanyahu has been warning against the Iranian threat. But if we take you back to October 7th, 2023, when Hamas invaded Israel and perpetrated the worst massacre against Jews since the Holocaust, that was an Iranian proxy, and Hezbollah in Lebanon, an Iranian proxy, and the Houthis in Yemen, and the militias in Iraq. Now, Israel has been fighting this seven-front war, but it's a defensive war. Israel is never the aggressor. And in this case, what we see is that President Trump decided to do exactly the opposite of his predecessor, President Biden, and actually take action to reassert U.S. power around the globe and the power of the West.
So true. Well, Colonel Mills, Iran, even after being warned against retaliation, launching a series of missile attacks, and Israel then responding with strikes across Iran. What are your thoughts on Iran's next move?
Well, thank you, Deneen. I think that's the challenge for the Iranians. Their leadership has been decimated. It's in disarray. There's supposedly reports that even the supreme leader has passed over authority to what remains the RGC. I think Iran's ability to strike back through ballistic missiles, drones, has become very limited. I think it's more likely going to be along the terrorist attacks, sleeper cells in the United States. But I think at this time they are really down and out. Now the Chinese are running an airlift. We don't know what's coming in on those. That's very concerning, and so we have to watch that closely.
True indeed.
Yeah.
President Trump describing the U.S. military strikes on 3 nuclear sites, and I quote, "It was a spectacular military success." He added the facilities were completely and totally obliterated. He even warned the U.S. could go after even more targets if Iran resists peace. Now, Ruthie, we know that Iran, they're not rational, but do you think they have some common sense not to retaliate and come back to the table to figure out a diplomatic resolution to this current situation with regard to their nuclear capabilities?
Okay, so first of all, it's not that they're not rational, it's that they are Islamist ideologues. That has its own rationale. They're true believers. They're believers in the caliphate. So, you have to take that into account. It isn't just some kind of irrational, they're not irrational actors. Now, when you say, are they going to come back to the table? I think President Trump made it very clear. What does diplomacy mean in this case? It means that Iran waves the white flag. And then Trump says, okay, we will agree to sit down with you. First, you surrender. That's the meaning of victory. That's the meaning of making America great again. We need to reassert Western power around the globe because it has gotten so out of hand. There's terrorism going on all over the place. And Iran is the head of the octopus. So and if they say we'll deal with you without getting rid of our nukes and without capitulating, then they won't abide by any deal they sign.
Yeah. Well, Colonel Mills, you mentioned the Chinese. I want to ask you about China. How much control does China have over Iran, and can they stop Iran from blocking the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, it's a great question. The world is on fire. The world is at war. This whole war in the Middle East is essentially a Chinese proxy conflict. Iran, the regime would not exist. China consumes 100% of the illegal exports from Iran, 100%. The regime would not be in power. And it's also priced in renminbi, so they're forced to buy all their consumer product right back from China. Iran is a Chinese proxy and colony. We have to be extremely clear with what's going on here. And the 3H club of the Houthis, Hamas, and Hezbollah, which is now like the 0.25H club, they're proxies of Iran. Iran was leading them. China was leading Iran. It's as simple as that. So let's say when the regime collapses in Iran, this is very bad for China. China is the loser. They lose all their cheap oil imports, and they lose their proxy in the Middle East, so that they'll only have Russia, North Korea, Venezuela, South Africa, and Pakistan left. So that's a huge proxy loss from China.
But China's not the only concern. The Kremlin confirming Russian President Putin will meet Iran's foreign minister in Moscow today. And that foreign minister reportedly said the two will consult with each other and coordinate positions. How do you see this playing out, Ruthie?
Well, sometimes the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and sometimes not. One of the things we saw a couple of years ago was how President Putin and Prime Minister Netanyahu made a deal that Russia would not down Israeli planes intercepting weapons convoys from Iran to Hezbollah in Lebanon. That was a realpolitik agreement, and the reason that Putin agreed with Israel on this issue was that Putin didn't want Iran being the hegemon over there. He wanted to be, and I think the same applies to China and Russia, Russia and Iran, China and Russia, and some issues they're all against America, but they are all fighting for hegemony, and so we'll see how that plays out.
Well, Colonel Mills, surgical strike, strategic, precision, precise. We're talking about Operation Midnight Hammer, which happened while we were sleeping and evidently, obviously, while Iran was sleeping. Your overview of how this took place and the outcome of it?
Well, thank you, Deneen. As opposed to past bombing efforts, let's say go back all the way to 1964, the Tonkin Gulf, 1983 in Lebanon, we did not have true precision strike capability. We now have, it's an era where we have one bomb, one target, you're done. It's not waves of aircraft. with carpet bombing, missing the target about 90% of the time. We truly are one bomb, one target. The three facilities in question were Fordo, Natanz, and Esfahan. They are gone. End of subject. Next question. This is really a new era, and so they're gone. Those are off the table. They're not an issue. Now it's really about when the Iranian regime is going to capitulate. They might continue to hang on. The IRGC rolls through new leadership about every 24 hours, so we'll have to see. But it was one bomb, one target. And this also addresses the mega debate, and I'm in the mega camp, is no new wars, no extended wars, no forever wars. But hey, let's just face it, Iran has been at war with America since at least 1983.
True.
Again, very strategic. 3 targets and 6 bombs. It's gone. Next question.
Yeah. Great summary. Ruthie, we only have about 35 seconds or so. What are your thoughts with regard to the possibility of Iran collapsing from within?
Oh, I think there's a great possibility. Today, Israel bombed the gates of Evin prison, where dissidents are held and tortured, and allowing them to escape. I think that's a great sign.
Awesome. Ruthie Blum, Colonel John Mills, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.